Oh my goodness, we are back. Hello everybody. The Premier League season is a few hours away, and of course that means the Premier Injuries live stream. So we're back, we're ready for the season ahead. We've put out loads of good content. I put in the comments, do check out our interview with FPL champion FPL Guns, but there's other good stuff there as well. However, before we get started, we always have to ask, how are you doing today, Mr. Ben?
Yeah, Mark. It's good to be back on the live stream. It seems like it's been an absolute lifetime. Today was going quite well until around about 12 o'clock. Then we started having issues with the website. So apologies to anybody who's been trying to access PremierReach.com injury table. We've been under attack by bots. Oh. We have. Make of that what you will. There's a temporary fix in place. It is up and running. I'm accessing it now. Fingers crossed that will continue through and up until the deadline.
We've got a message here from oh my god, Nahalana. He said, Ben must pronounce my name, otherwise I'm not liking the video, and unsubscribe. Let's go.
Jason, how can I pronounce the name correctly when you can't even pronounce the name yourself? And I don't have access to this live chat. So what we're saying, Nabala blah Bahama. That was something along those lines, wasn't
it? It's spelled NH
right
LANHLA.
Nalahamama.
I think that's. We're trying our best here, Mr. Viltaki. I hope that's all right, and that we don't lose a subscriber over this, because that would be quite horrific. But yeah, we're going to get into it. We've got a few welcomes back. Sheffield United are there for the taking. Hi, guys. Eze captain, a question on that, because we've been big on Eze all through the summer, haven't we? But yeah, it's great. And also there's a question about Diaz. Now, just before we get into it, to remind everybody that you have to ask your questions around the time that we're going through teams. So we're going to go through all the teams alphabetically, especially for people who are watching a little bit later. But yeah, just get your questions in, try and time them. I'll try and remember them as we go through, but it's a little bit easier for me. Also, as Ben mentioned there, the website has been under attack, but it is on the screen here. It's all ready to go. So if one of your questions isn't asked in this live stream, head over to our wonderful Premier Injuries website. It's been given a bit of an update over the summer. Should be easier for you to use. And then obviously you can go through each team alphabetically. If not, you can message us. But today we are absolutely under the boot, because the games are starting today. Also, you can check out my latest article on FF Scout about maybe how the rule changes might affect FPL in terms of minutes played. This is something we'll talk about in the live stream. But let's head over to it. Let's start off with Bournemouth and any big injury news for the team going into game week 1.
Nothing major. I will start this live stream as I did almost on every occasion last season. The caveat is, these formations, these predicted 11s are not locked in. We've had a glut of press conferences between 1 and 2 o'clock, so they will need tweaking, a little bit of updating. So like I say, keep on checking back. As soon as I come off the live stream, I'll head back in and start tweaking those. Ariona, or Andoni Ariola, and it's not Gary O'Neill, is one of the managers that we have just heard from. Didn't give any definitive answers, and in fact didn't really name individuals in and around that squad who were potentially going to miss out this weekend. However, what we do know, the likes of Lloyd Kelly, Marcus Tavernier, Ryan Fredericks, they're more long-term absentees, so there's no fear of those players coming back. But there are question marks over Dominic Solanke. He was named on the bench for the last pre-season game, but he wasn't risked as a precaution. In a similar vein, Ryan Christie, he was omitted from the matchday squad, but Andoni Ariola said that it was more, again, of a precautionary measure. No need to take risks heading into the new campaign. And finally, there's a possibility that Adam Smith may miss out. Now with Ryan Fredericks, also that opens up that spot on the right-hand side. And we have seen Jadon Anthony deputise there in that last game. But potentially we've just seen the arrival of Max Aarons from Norwich, although in terms of match fitness and sharpness, he hasn't played competitively since that under-21 championships for England back in July was his last game. So whether he's ready to start this weekend, probably not. Also, new signing Alex Scott came in from Bristol City, I believe, if I remember correctly. Yes, he has signed, but unfortunately he arrives with what's classed as a significant knee problem, and we're still looking at a number of months before he's going to be in first team contention.
Great update there on Bournemouth, and we're going to move it to my team, Arsenal, up next. And there's obviously the big injury blow to Gabriel Jesus up top, but also it's looking like from your team selection there that Zinchenko is not going to be fit for that first game of the season. For those that watch Community Shield, Timber was absolutely fantastic, so I'm not too worried now. I think that's one of the big things about Arsenal this season. We've really done well. But also Thomas Partey's not in the midfield. Do you want to talk us through all this kind of injury news at the Gunners, please?
Yeah, so what we know in terms of a player who's been definitively ruled out, there are only two absentees confirmed by Mikel Arteta. One being Mo Elneny, that relates to a knee problem going back to January, and the second being, as you just alluded to, Gabriel Jesus. Now we're around about 2 weeks post-op for the Brazilian, and it's hoped that maybe next week he can step up his training a little bit, but it's still very early in terms of that recovery. So he's not going to be pushing for any kind of involvement, maybe towards the end of this month at very best. But, it could be after the international break, when he's risked by Mikel Arteta. And that there's a number of factors to consider, namely, how Arsenal are playing, if they're getting the results, and maybe those who are deputising these players playing well, then that sort of eases that pressure of burden on trying to rush Jesus back. Everybody else, in theory, is available for selection, or should I say injury-free. The caveat would be that the likes of Zinchenko's had very few minutes over the summer. That's been a calf problem again that carried over from the back end of last season. So he lacks sharpness. Tomiyasu lacks that match fitness as well. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. With regards to the team, I know you've been championing the cause for Leandro Trossard to lead that Gunners attack. He's been very bright during pre-season, but there are, as you alluded to before, a couple of options that Mikel Arteta could look to deploy, namely around Eddie Nketiah, and also if Florent Balogun is fit. He's missed the last few matches with a foot injury.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the team develops. Giandre has asked a very good question about the Timber situation, because like I said, he played really well in the Community Shield. We've obviously paid quite big money for him. So Giandre is wondering, do we reckon Timber will be nailed as he can play left back, right back, centre back, or do you see his role as more rotational this season, Ben?
It's difficult. Look, he's got the shirt and it's his to keep. You put in the performances. What I would suggest is in and around those Champions League games, certainly Mikel Arteta will be looking to rotate, and it's whether he believes Timber or Zinchenko is best utilised in that competition, and which player will be best suited to the Premier League. So I think for the moment, like I say, it's if he carries on those performances and backs up what he's done in the Community Shield, then it's going to make it difficult for Zinchenko. Like I say, particularly since he's been out for such a long time, there are going to be a while before he gets back to optimum fitness levels. And, will he get that opportunity to perform regularly and enough minutes to really stake a claim if Timber's, playing well week in and week out?
Samir R has asked a question. Got Salah, Rashford and Maddison, but no Arsenal midfielders. Am I crazy? Ben, do you want to start us off with that discussion?
There is certainly appeal in that Arsenal midfield, without a shadow of a doubt. I think it's probably trying to nail down who you think is going to be, the player that's nailed down. You may be taking a risk, overlooking the likes of Bukayo Saka and Ødegaard. Based on certainly what they've done last season, you would assume that Declan Rice is going to be a nailed down starter. But as a holding midfielder, he's not somebody that's really going to attract any interest from an FPL perspective. Everybody else in that side, the Trossards, the Havertz, the Martinellis, I think they're all vying for places. And I think that's going to come down to individual performances. And they're not the types of players really that I want to be keeping in my team as long-term options, because I just don't see this getting a minute. So if anybody, it's got to be the Saka and the Ødegaards. I'm reluctant to look elsewhere.
I think the thing as well with, I like Salah. He's in my team. Rashford is as well. But I think James Maddison's lost significant appeal now that Harry Kane's gone from Tottenham. I usually try and target, the top teams. And I don't think Tottenham will be one of those top teams. We're looking at Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, probably Chelsea, Manchester United. I don't see Tottenham really kind of getting up there with those teams this season. And so you want to really target players from those teams. And just one point as well, Saka, I think, has to be your Arsenal midfielder. And a point that I want to make is actually maybe Ødegaard loses a little appeal as well because of the new minutes rules. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but wasn't Ødegaard subbed off 23 times last season? So he never normally sees out the full game. I don't know if it's for conserving or protecting him. But with these new rules, I want players that are going to be playing deep into those last few minutes. Tired legs, tired minds. Defensive make mistakes, don't they, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, there might be a slight sort of mental shift from managers as well, as with these new rules. And if teams are dominating matches and you've got that 2 or possibly 3 goal cushion, then maybe managers will be looking to those star players, their talismanic players of the teams, as looking and bringing those off and resting them and not be involved in the latter stages, that 80 sort of to 90 plus minute game. So it could be that we're seeing a shift in almost those players who inherently you would say, yes, you play 90 minutes, but maybe they won't play full games depending on how things are panning out on the pitch.
Yeah, it's we'll see how it goes through the season. I think that's one of the biggest areas that we'll have to kind of look at and analyse as it goes on. We've got a question about Balogun, possible loan deal. We don't really do transfer rumours here, so we'll probably skip that one. But what I would say is if he joins a team in the Premier League, I think he's quite a good 4.5 striking asset. Martinelli, I think you've kind of covered there, Ben. So Samir R has said, Trossard to get more minutes than Jesus. Is there any risk there? I think they're all kind of risks, aren't they, Ben? Probably Jesus is a little bit more nailed, but, going forward, we saw Havertz starting as a false 9 in the Community Shield. I think it's the point that you said, it's game to game. It's going to be tactics for the opposition rather than just kind of a set and forget team that maybe we saw a little bit last season.
Yeah, I'm certainly expecting Mikel Arteta. And of course, the squad carries a little bit more depth. So he does have that flexibility to be able to change things up a little bit more, particularly in those attacking areas. On their day, when fully fit, I do see Gabriel Jesus as being, the priority, the main man, as it were, in the rest. I'm not saying making up the numbers, but, potentially at risk of sharing minutes. We've seen, Gabriel Martinelli, even though he had, that great run in you. But were you convinced that he would be starting week in and week out, when everybody was back? I wasn't. So, look, it's going to be an interesting season. Like I say, the Champions League comes into play this year. I think that, for me, just provides a completely different dimension to how the squad needs to be managed. So, yeah, look, if you haven't seen, I have done my predicted sort of top 20 or my league table. And as you mentioned, your Rory moment with regards to Haaland, Chelsea Rory, that is. I'm having mine, and I'm sorry, Jason, but I just do not fancy Arsenal this season, and I've got them to finish outside the top four.
I'm going to leave.
I just think it's the management around the European competition, and the pressures and the demands. That's ultimately he's going to come home to roost.
The thing
Sorry.
No. I mean that's what we're here for. The thing is I've obviously got my Rory Jennings prediction as well, that Tottenham finish outside the top 10 now. So we'll see. I guess people can kind of join throughout the season in terms of that. We do have a question now. Obviously, Haaland is Manchester City, but I think it's a good question in terms of this rotation discussion. I was asked how many times was Haaland subbed off last season. He was subbed off 12 times, and so he averaged a 79.1 minutes per appearance. So again, kind of that factoring that in about, these players playing the full 90. The Salahs might sneak in as better captaincy choices just because they're going to play the full 90. Let's have a look.
I would add that of all of the discussion with regards to players and these additional time added on, I do think that Haaland is out there on his own with regards to any conversations about playing a full 90 minutes, because Haaland could come literally on in a 15, 20-minute cameo and get a brace, get a hat-trick. I think he's that good, and I think City are that good. So almost, and ultimately, if you're serious about FPL and you're wanting to do well, even if, every strand within your body doesn't want a player that's picked up by nearly 90% of the community, you're going to have to, because, on the occasions when he does bang, it's just going to affect your overall rank so badly that, it's you're all in or you're all out, and that carries a huge risk.
Wow. Interesting. Good discussions here. We're going to move it on from Arsenal. We've got a couple more questions. Raya situation, I think, puts Ramsdale into doubt. I don't know who will be first choice. Samir says Ben obviously putting that Newcastle above them. John Dre says, cheers, Ben.
No, actually.
Oh, interesting. Let me just quickly get through these and then you can go back to the Newcastle point. Edward Schulman says, I believe Arsenal will do maximum to win Premier League. They'll play second squad even if it's Champions League, from a Chelsea fan. So yeah, circling back to the Newcastle point then, where have you put them, just really quickly, because we'll discuss them obviously a little bit more when we get to the Magpies.
Yeah, sixth is my expectation for Newcastle, and I would think that's a good season for me.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good season. Last time, Aston Villa had a fantastic end to their season. Do you expect them to push on, Ben? Is there any injury news that should upset them?
Yes and no. The headline grabber was the setback for Emi Buendia. Last knockings of training on Wednesday, suffered a severe setback in terms of a significant knee injury outlined by Unai Emery. I understand that does relate to his ACL, his anterior cruciate ligament. Going for further evaluations to meet with a specialist. They fully expect that to confirm that he will undergo reconstructive surgery. An initial timeline, they're always optimistic. They're always talking about this 6 and potentially 7 months. What I would say about any return to play at any level with regards to once you've had reconstructive surgery within 9 months, that carries, there's a fly. Yeah. No, got it, eluded. It carries a significant risk of re-injury or recurrence. And every month on month after that 9-month period, that risk is reduced by 51%. So while you can't inherently, rule Emi Buendia back out, every term before the end of the season, discussions will be taken behind closed doors with regards to the pros and cons of actually doing so. So that's the big news. Elsewhere, they are missing several players within their squad, but are there, none of those players, other than Jacob Ramsey, who fractured his metatarsal playing for England, none of those players are what you would really consider to be nailed down first team starters. With regards to this starting 11, the only slight worry or concern or discussion point that I had is on the left-hand side. And I really struggled with this with regards to the Mings, the Torres, and then maybe even throwing Luca Digne into the equation on the left-hand side. I've went with this, and I know Torres is more of a centre-back, and I have seen reports that even Tyrone Mings could go out further to the left. I'm just not so sure. So just something to be aware of.
It's a tough one to call as well. I was seeing how they're going to fit all this talent into the squad, because you got, the new signings would kind of imply, Diaby, obviously Bailey's been there since last season, but, two wingers, but then would they play two up top and whatnot? It's a hard discussion, isn't it, going into this season? Let's have a look at some of the questions. Just to remind people once again, do try and keep them on the team that we're talking about or about to come up to, because my memory's good, but not that good to remember all of these in terms of coming over. Let's continue on to Brentford, and now obviously the big news is Ivan Toney will not be playing till his ban is over. But is there any injury news or things that people need to be aware of with the team?
Yeah, absolutely. Christian Norgard is a big one. He's been absent for most of pre-season. In fact, only played in a 75-minute run-out for the B team last weekend, so wasn't involved in that game. I think it was against Lille, that 0-0 draw that saw the legs of Frank Onyeka and also Brian Mbeumo limped off. Thankfully, those are both contact injuries, dead legs. We're waiting to hear from Thomas Frank. I'm just having a quick look to see if there's been any mention of those players. Like I say, I'm fully expecting those players to be involved. Also, Rico Henry was absent from the matchday squad. There's been absolutely no mention or reports as to the reason behind that. Therefore, he isn't listed on the injury table as being an absentee. I don't quite know what's going on there. It could be that he maybe being given permission to miss that game. Are we having a look? Frank confirms. This is Jay Harris from The Athletic, great reporter with regards to updates for Brentford. Give the guy a follow. Rico Henry and Josh Da Silva both available to face Tottenham. He did come out and he said that Rico Henry will start, so that was obviously a precautionary measure. Elsewhere within that Brentford team, again, no major concerns really with regards to players who are nailed down starters for that team.
Just going back to the Aston Villa team news, Mark Nash has said Ben Moreno would be a nailed down starter for Villa, but obviously we're talking about people that can play at the moment, and obviously he is injured. I guess the question with him is, when is he likely to be back? Because then that might solve that selection headache that we're talking about.
Yeah, long-term hamstring injury, had surgery on that. Always difficult to give a definitive timeline when, those setbacks stretch beyond 2 to 3 months. So the expectation was, we're talking about the back end of August, but the hamstring injuries, you need to be very, very careful with those, and it depends on how they respond to that one being integrated back with the group and that step up in intensity. And that's a thing you've got to worry about. We'll touch upon Newcastle, for example, with Joe Willock. He was touted for an early return. He's felt some discomfort with his hamstring. That's going to put him out till after the international break. So, like I say, we're still a few weeks away with regards to Alex Moreno being back in contention for the Villains.
We've got a question. Is Mings nailed?
Do you know what? Is he still... I'm working on the assumption that he's still club captain. I'm just not 100% sure. I'm really not.
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, he go through that little bit of a purple patch last season where we sort of drop out the starting 11. I don't know if it was under Steven Gerrard or not. I'm not sure of his appearance record under Unai Emery. Obviously, Villa finished the season very strong, so that's why I've got Tyrone Mings in there. He's tried, he's tested, he's proven. Torres isn't. Torres is a big summer acquisition, but like I say, would I be totally surprised if Luca Digne come in and there was a little bit of a shuffle in that back line? Absolutely not.
So we got loads of questions on Brentford. A lot of people have their eyes on the Mbeumo injury situation. What is the latest update with that? Because some people are a little bit anxious that he was flagged on FPL. Was that more precautionary? Do you see him definitely starting?
Yeah, he has trained this week. Like I say, it was an impact injury, a dead leg. No need to take any chances during these pre-season friendlies, particularly that last game. So, he is available for selection. No issues.
Giandro says, is Visa nailed or any competition there up top?
He has been playing. I think Thomas Frank does have a little bit of flexibility with regards to how he's going to set up his team. Previously, we have seen a 3-5-2 or a 4-3-3. I think we saw with Mbeumo even, alongside him and Lewis Potter. Lewis Potter and Visa have played up there as well. I think Visa definitely, deserves his opportunity. We've discussed this in the past with regards to his goal involvement ratio per 90, which has been exceptional. Always seems to get in and around those goals, whether a goal or assist from the bench. I think there's an opportunity for him now to go out and prove himself as a bona fide starter as part of that Brentford team. So, while everybody seems to be gravitating towards Brian Mbeumo as an out of position, midfield sort of forward, we touched upon pre-season about, is there a dark horse? Is there a surprise package there in Yona Wissa? And I definitely believe he's worth a punt over those early rounds.
We've got Samir. He says, a Brentford fan, not confident this season, maybe just outside the top 10. Transfers uninspiring so far. I mean, we kind of talked about it last season. It's going to be very tough without talisman Ivan Toney as well. It's a big blow, psychologically, it's going to be tough for the team. Just quickly going through any last questions here. Martin Keenan has said, should be a goal or hitting the woodwork, and Mbeumo golden boot. So yeah, let's continue with the discussions, and we're going to move on to Brighton. And we've already got questions about João Pedro. He looks like an exciting 5.5 asset. But yeah, is there more kind of Brighton news that people need to be aware of? I think there was a press conference release from De Zerbi about goalkeepers as well.
So we've just heard from De Zerbi in the midst of cyber attacks and this, that, and the other. I was trying to juggle balls. We've got 2 flagged doubts ahead of the game. That relates to Adam Webster and Adam Lallana. Manager said that he wouldn't be prepared to take any risks. Obviously, I've got Webster starting here. If that's not the case, potentially what we could see, we could maybe look to bring Joel Veltman into that centre-back position, Pascal Gross drop onto the right-hand side, and somebody like Billy Gilmore playing in that, that double pivot role alongside Dahoud. So that's a possibility, and that's probably one that I'm going to change. Like I say, he doesn't really want to be pushing Webster too much if there are concerns there. Tariq Lamptey, if anybody's wondering, is not available at the moment to come on the right-hand side. He's not injured. He's working his way back to full fitness. So I think he was included against Newcastle in that pre-season game. Might have got minimal minutes or none at all. And that's really what, the top and bottom of his or lack of involvement over the summer.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting situation there because, injuries, transfers, and also, I guess, I don't know, I don't like the rotational goalkeeper kind of message from De Zerbi. There's a few things that makes me a little bit uneasy about Brighton. I've still got Matoma in my team. I've still got João Pedro because of his price point, but we'll kind of see how they do. It kind of going forward this season with the kind of changes in their team. Moving from Brighton to newly promoted Burnley. I don't know how many assets people have from the Clarets, but quick team news on them?
It'll have to be very, very quick because, I'll hold my hands up and say I haven't got a clue. In all actual fact. Vincent Kompany wasn't really very forthcoming in terms of offering a team news update. What we do know, Michael Obafemi, he underwent hamstring surgery after being injured, I think, playing for the Republic of Ireland. One player that did catch the attention last season and was also mentioned as part of our pre-season build-up was the performances of Manuel Benson. And I was really looking forward to seeing what kind of involvement he's had over the pre-season. Vincent Kompany's come out and he said that Belgium, I think he's a Belgian player. Apologies if I've got that wrong. Has signed it. He's playing a new 4-year deal. And hasn't featured at all. No reason as to why, whether he's being managed, whether he's been injured. So there's no discussions with regards to that. Suffice to say, even if he is available, then he isn't really going to be fully up to match speed. So that again, there's a couple of question marks within that team. Gudmundsson is probably the player that we'd maybe question as to, is he nailed down within this Clarets team? Maybe not. We have had the signing of Sander Berge from rivals Sheffield United. That was only completed on Wednesday. So in terms of his registration, he is fit and available. But, has Vincent Kompany had enough time, or does he believe that Berge is right to be thrown straight in there, given that he's only probably had maximum one session with his new teammates?
We're going to swing back to the Brighton team news. We know a little bit more about that. FPL Animate says, will March start for sure?
I'm glad you actually touched upon that, because again, Solly Marsh ended 22-23 with a hamstring problem, kept him out those remaining games. We did see a brief cameo from Marsh. I think it was against Chelsea out in the US, around 45 minutes, 60 minutes. And then he disappeared off the scale again. Roberto De Zerbi said there hadn't been a setback. They were just managing the player and they were targeting a return in game week 1. Now, he did have a run out in their last game, but it comes down to, is he going to be at optimum levels? I would say probably not. So even if he does play, what type of output or performance are we going to see? In a similar vein, Lewis Dunk, he only played his first game last weekend, but the fact that he's a centre back, I feel a lot more comfortable with him being in the starting 11. The expectation is he's a stopper. He doesn't have to go out there and entertain and beat players and, be exciting and dynamic like a Solly March will. And probably, that will come in maybe 3, 4 and 5 games for Solly March. So it's a difficult call. I did look at Buonanotte as a possibility to start in there. The young Argentine has done well in pre-season. So, maybe that's a bit of a call, but I've went with experience and I've went with the fact that, Solly March had a great campaign last time out.
We've got a couple questions about Estupiñán. Ben, just before we go in, what's his first name again?
Purvis.
You got your notes ready this season.
With new Ben, new season.
New Ben, new season. Same old pronunciations though. Let's get to the question though about good old Purvis. We've got kind of two on the same kind of subject, so I'll mix them together. Basically, a few people are worried about, are Brighton a little bit of a trap? Is it paying a bit too much for Estupiñán? Because Dunk can be quite a good differential. Also, I can add there that Dunk, Brighton are very good at set pieces, so he could be getting onto them. But do we need Estupiñán, especially with the problems that we've kind of already alluded to, Ben? What do you think?
I think the lure of Brighton, and yes, you look back at what happened last season and the performances of Estupiñán, not just from a defensively, the Seagulls were good, but in terms of what he brought to the team as an attacking outlet, which is always good if you've got that maybe added bonus of a defender who can potentially get some goal involvements, then great. But also, I think those early season fixtures for Brighton make those players in Estupiñán a hard player to overlook. And yes, his ownership, might be fairly high and it might be skewed based on that, but Brighton will want to lay down a marker for the start of the season. They want to prove to doubters, supporters, and fans, outside of the club, that even losing the likes of McAllister and Caicedo and Levi Colwill going back to Chelsea, they want to be to go out to prove that this can still perform, and that the players within the club, have the ability and the talent to be able to replicate, what they've done last season. So it is a tough call. There are a lot of questionables, but I still think during this early part, I think Estupiñán is a good buy.
I think as well, just looking at the fixtures, Luton, Wolves, West Ham, and Bournemouth, in the first 6 game weeks, throw in their Newcastle and Man United are obviously much more difficult, but they're quite good fixtures to start the season, maybe build a bit of psychological boost. You can't kind of overplay how maybe a nice big win against Luton, Wolves, and then holding West Ham or getting a good result there as well at home. That could be 3 wins on the trot, and then what happens from there could be anybody's guess, because football is all about that kind of momentum and things like that. We're going to continue over to Chelsea now. Lots of questions about their assets. Obviously, Nkunku has been, confirmed out for a long, long while. So that kind of cements in place Nicholas Jackson. But there's loads of assets in the team that have question marks over them. And also more question marks because will Caicedo join? And also not the best injury record last season. What are your thoughts on the Blues in general?
I do like Mauricio Pochettino, and I agree with, again, comments that you made with regards to from the outside looking in. It seems to be all rosy at Stamford Bridge. I still think, it cannot be any worse than last season. And, if they get off to a good start, I can see them building upon that, again, getting a bit of momentum. The loss of Nkunku is going to be big, but hopefully Jackson can pick up that mantle. If they were to add Caicedo, and Pochettino has referenced the fact that they are still actively seeking to bring players in, although he wouldn't name individuals, I think that just changes the dynamic of the team, potentially sitting alongside Enzo Fernandez. Gallagher could then maybe push up a little bit. In the past, I haven't been a big fan of Raheem Sterling, that, but I'm expecting a big season from Sterling. He was very disappointing last time out, and he held his hands up and he said, part of the problem was maybe a weight issue, and that was a contributory factor. His diet around picking up those hamstring injuries, that's been remedied and rectified over the summer. So, if we can see Raheem Sterling back to the player that has, graced the Fantasy Premier League for such a long time, then he's going to be a big asset. And also Mudryk, he came in, expectation levels were massive. But as we know, there's always going to be a period of adaptation. Doesn't matter what kind of price tag you arrive at the club for this. That doesn't change the fact that there's going to be a bedding period. I feel as if he's had that now. He's had a good pre-season. He was involved in the under-21s over the summer. And I think Mudryk could be a nice little surprise, asset for the Blues this time.
Do you worry about having some of these Chelsea assets though, because there's so many people in the squad now? Madueke is obviously kind of in the wings, can kind of come in. That there's a lot of good talent there in the squad, and I think this was a bit of a problem last season. I don't kind of want to own some of their assets just because people can be going in and out. Chukwuemeka, is he going to be playing or is he not? A lot of people are saying a good 4.5 option there, but is he nailed?
With the transfer window still open, then, anything can happen. Like I say, I mentioned it before, Pochettino is still actively in the market for recruiting players. Obviously, I think he'll start in game week 1. Beyond that, who knows? It's a big game, for Chelsea to kick off their season, and what an opportunity to lay down a marker, and if they got 3 points on the board, then all of a sudden, you're forgetting what's happened last season and the focus and that wave of optimism comes through. I think the big thing for me this season was Chelsea and why I like them. And you can never underestimate the impact of European football and playing, those big games in the midweek and traveling and the psychological drain, never mind the physical exertions, but the fact that Chelsea won't have any distractions and their focus can be on, that Premier League. Now, yeah, they'll carry a big squad, but if you're only playing one game every 6, 7 or 8 days, which they will for the majority of the time, then I can see a fairly stabilised, Pochettino starting 11, something which we haven't seen in a long, long time, particularly, under Graham Potter. And that continuity, I think, will certainly help. That will breed confidence, and I do think they will have quite a good campaign. I'm quietly confident that they may surprise a few people this season.
One final question. There's rumours of Kepa Arrizabalaga going to Bayern Munich. Does that worry you about team selection? Would you not have him in your team because of that?
I wouldn't have him anyway, to be honest. I know he's Thomas Tuchel is a big fan of Kepa. Is it Sanchez? Have I got that right? Is it Sanchez that's come in
from Brighton?
Chelsea.
Yeah.
So, if Sanchez was to adopt that, that number one mantle, then I wouldn't have any issues with that. Kepa's all right, but I don't think he's a huge loss in the grand scheme of things.
We've got a question here for you, Ben. Quick one: Mbermo or Matoma? Which would you rather in your team?
Matoma.
Nice. Up next, Crystal Palace, the Eagles. They were flying high at the end of last season. I love Eze. He's in my team. I think he's such an exciting asset. But is there any news that should be affecting the team at all, apart from the ongoing Gaeta situation?
Yeah, there had been some suggestion or talk that maybe Doucouré had suffered an injury last weekend, which forced him off. That was never really the case. He did take a bit of an awkward tumble, and there were concerns for maybe 10 to 20 seconds after that. A little bit of pain, ran that off. He was taken off just as a matter of course. He's trained all week, so absolutely fine with regards to that. We know that new signing Matthias Franca won't be available for a short while. We're looking at a few weeks. Will Hughes and Michael Olise both remain on the sidelines. Tyreek Mitchell is possibly one player that may force his way into the team, waiting to follow up on that press conference from Roy Hodgson. That was a thigh strain that he suffered during a pre-season game, but having missed the last few matches again, it may be a little bit risky to throw him straight in there. So that's just why we went with Nathaniel Klein on the left-hand side.
Just having a look through the questions here. You've answered the Mitchell situation. We've had a few questions about Phil Foden. We will get to Phil Foden in a bit. We are getting through the teams alphabetically. Everton up next. What is the kind of latest news with the Toffees?
The Toffees, sorry, I've got messages coming through saying website under attack. We're in a safe mode at the moment, which effectively asks users if they're human or not. You tick the box, you get in. We're having to remove that screen to see if things with the servers have been rectified. So if it goes off again, apologies. So back to the Toffees. A couple of concerns are certainly talking points. James Korkowski taken off last weekend, and that would have been what can I say? We're talking about a defender who was the only outfield player last year who played every minute in the Premier League last season, and for him to pick up an injury in that final pre-season match and potentially miss game week 1. Well, you couldn't make that up, but thankfully he's been past fit. Sean Dyche said it again, it was just a precautionary measure. Dan Joma had a few questions about him. He missed out last weekend against Sporting, but he has trained, although concerns with regards to his fitness, hasn't done a great deal over pre-season, so minutes are likely to come from the bench. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin, no live stream would be complete without a mention of the Everton striker. He is fit. There's been no setbacks, but he's been managed very, very conservatively. We know injury problems now span almost 2 years with the striker. So he did play and score against Sporting, but whether he's involved this weekend remains to be seen. Of course, competitive minutes in the Premier League differs completely to anything that you do in those either behind closed doors games or friendly. So my own feeling is it's probably Nemo Pie with maybe Calvert-Lewin minutes from the bench.
And has Sean Dyche mentioned touch and go at all? You know, that's the usual go-to phrase.
Do you know what? Other than maybe his first or second press conference, certainly touch and go isn't something which I'm aware of Sean Dyche saying. Unfortunately, and rather disappointingly, fingers crossed, there will be several references to a touch and go at various points of the season.
And somebody that a lot of people are interested in, if he's touch and go, Young, you've put him in at left back, but a lot of people are saying, is he nailed? Is this for real?
No, far from it. I would think it's, when fully fit, you're going to be looking at Michaelenko as that starter for the Toffees. He's coming off the back of an injury. He isn't 100%. So that's why I've went with Ashley Young. And there is a reason that I've had to opt to pick Ashley Young. My choices were very, very limited in terms of who I could actually pick up as a viable FPL option. I think it was between him and maybe Ryan Yates from Nottingham Forest. But as I had to opt for Niakite from the Forest midfield, that's why I went with Young over Yates.
Wonderful.
Long story.
Yeah, if people go onto your Twitter, you've got a fantastic FPL team with a very wonderful twist to it. I don't think I could do mine because I've got too many letters in my name, but people have got to go over there to see it. Fulham up next. Kind of sad news with their defensive midfielder Polina out. But apart from that, should be as good as possible, this team.
Yeah, Marco Silva talked about the disruption caused by injuries and players being linked with moves away. That affected, the latter two players in the main. Mitrovic, he's returned, admittedly, there was a big offer on the table and he was given that some serious consideration and was maybe on the verge of having a chat. He's decided to remain at Fulham, and Marco Silva said he's fully focused. He's been training really hard with the normal gusto and enthusiasm that you expect with Mitrovic. So that's why we have him back in. Got some minutes from the bench last weekend. But Tyson hasn't been involved at all. So he's another player that's talked to, maybe linked to Tottenham, but also Monaco. Elsewhere within that team, like you say, Lukic to come in for Palhina. That was a dislocated shoulder. We'll see how he responds to an increase in contact in those training to determine when he could be back. But like you say, pretty much everyone else within that team, maybe with the exception of Andres Pereira. We know he had ankle surgery back at the beginning of May. He's still, returning to optimum levels. So it's more of a fitness issue as opposed to being injury related.
We got a question with Jimenez as well. Ben, how do you think his signing is going to affect the squad? Is he going to get played all that much?
If Mitrovic is fully fit and focused, he's their starter. He's their main man. He's the one that's going to carry that Fulham team. So, minutes may be a premium for Raul Jimenez, and he may have to work as maybe Carlos Vinicius did around those times when Mitrovic has picked up the odd suspension or picked up an injury. He's certainly not somebody that I would see, forcing his way into that starting 11 week in and week out. I'm yet to see the Raul Jimenez, before that, horrific head injury. I thought he looked a little bit off the pace at Wolves, and maybe this move to Fulham will help rejuvenate him and give him a new lease of life. And if he can maybe recapture some of those pre-injury levels, forms and displays and performances, then yes, Fulham have got a great player on their hands. But as long as Mitrovic is there, I don't really see Marco Silva moving from that set 4-2-3-1 formation, which unfortunately means that there's only one, real sort of strike and roll up for grabs.
Yeah, I wish Jimenez all the best, because truly horrific, that head injury, and we'd like to see him back to his best as well, just for that, for his recovery. We're going to move it now to Liverpool. Loads of questions about the Liverpool assets, especially the front line, because it's not settled. We don't know. I think we've both written about it in the kind of build up to the pre-season. Diaz and Gakpo had more minutes, but Jota and Nunez had more goal involvements. So yeah, you've kind of gone almost 50-50 here. You've got Jota and you've got Diaz, but you've left out Nunez and Gakpo. So yeah, well, could you talk us through the team? Why isn't Nunez and Gakpo in? Why have you gone with this starting 11?
Difficult. You hit the nail right on the head there, Jason, in terms of most of the team picks itself in terms of how it's going to set up. The areas of, which are questionable are going to be that attacking area. If we go with this 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 possibly, or even a 4-2-2-2, or even a 3, depending on where Trent gets deployed, I think there's going to be a lot of fluidity in this movement. But for now, I've went with this 4-3-3 formation. The starting, hold on, Szoboszlai. I mean, I think that's pretty good, by the way.
That is pretty class. I'm impressed.
I do have him starting potentially, if Klopp goes with a 4-2-3-1, that will allow maybe the likes of a Gakpo, who I think is slightly ahead in the pecking order in terms of Darwin Nunez. Gakpo, of course, could play a little bit deeper, and then you would maybe see Jones move out the team. But I think Jones deserves his place on merit in that starting 11, certainly since he came back in, post-injury. He's been excellent for Liverpool, so that's why we have him starting. Am I 100%? Is it nailed down with Diogo Jota? Not. Like I say, it may be that it would be a Gakpo over a Nunez for me, but we'll stick with this for now and keep your fingers crossed.
Martin Keenan, he's got some strong opinions here. He says Jones won't start, boss. Gakpo guaranteed start at every match. I just think, for me personally, whether they do or don't play, it's too much rotation risk with Liverpool assets anyway. The only ones that are definitely going to start are like those ones further down the field, the Trents, the Robertsons, the Van Dijks, and then Salah. And I think that's the only kind of people that you want to gamble on as well. The others, from the fact, this season in FPL especially, it's going to be important with the lengthier games, 5 substitutes. There's lots of things at play here that could disrupt our teams. You want people that are definitely going to play week in, week out. And I'd remove that headache by just not kind of getting in people that might disrupt my team. Now, Luton are up next. Again, I don't know how many of these assets people are really going to be looking at, so we might skip through this team quite quickly, Ben.
Yep, I'm happy with that. Maybe one player who is attracting attention, and it may have went under the radar, but the return of Ross Barkley to the Premier League. Feels he's got a lot to prove. Had a season out in League One in France last year, done okay, but returns to the Premier League. And like I say, he's probably want to go out there and answer a few of these critics, a few of those doubters. Wrong. If we see the Ross Barkley that convinced Chelsea to splash all that money and his performances for Everton, then the Hatters have got a great player on their books.
Yeah, indeed. Bell's probably the only one that people are interested from Luton as well, because he's a 4.0 starter. Team that people have a little bit of interest in is Manchester City. There's a lot of talk. Is Foden going to play? Who's going to be in the starting back line? Is Diaz injured because of a rumoured head injury? What is the kind of news there, Ben?
Yeah, the main talking point is the Alvarez stroke Foden. I've took Kevin De Bruyne out of the equation. That was his first minutes at the Community Shield at Wembley last weekend. They actually thought he looked a little bit heavy, actually, and he's probably certainly not up to levels. Picked up that hamstring injury in the Champions League, so maybe a week or two before we see him back really pushing for a start. I have went for Foden, but we know with Pep Guardiola, it could really go either way. I've also dropped John Stones into that back line once again. We've seen, back towards the back end of the season, he was tremendous in that sort of hybrid role, having the opportunity to push forward. But now I see, with the arrival of Mateo Kovacic alongside Rodri, I think Pep will go with those in that double pivot, and that's why John Stones deserves his place in the team, albeit in that back line. The Diaz, well, that's one that we'll have to wait and see, but we do know that Nathan Ake, Laporte, it's an area of the team that they're well stocked. Akanji could even come in there as well. He can change things to a 3-5-2 if they wanted, maybe push Kyle Walker a little bit higher up the pitch. So I'll do some digging, and maybe there may be a slight tweak to this lineup. But look, it's difficult. It's a difficult one to call. I'll leave it at that.
We do have questions on the new left centre back Guardiola, who's been signed as well. Some are saying Guardiola has said Guardiola starts. What do you think on that? Again, we've not had that press conference yet. So does that again complicate things? We keep talking about availability. Now, obviously, Manchester City didn't have many injuries last season, but what was the data on the number of players that played over that kind of 3,000 minutes? Was it just one outside Ederson?
One or two, very, very low, but that's not that's more of a reflection, I think, of the strength and depth within the squad.
Yeah.
And
it's a rotation risk is what I'm saying, really.
Yeah, the vast number of games that they play. I think even Pep referenced it. They're going to have that Club World Cup. They're going to have the Club World Championships, as well as the Champions League. So he's going to need that squad, and that squad will be used extensively. There's very few players, or if any, of the outfield players who are actually nailed down for a start. With regards to, Guardiola, can we just cut that bit? Guardiola, fuck. That new player that they've just signed, defender.
It's like Guardiola. It's Guardiola, I think.
Guardiola, right. We'll go with Guardiola. Regarding a start, that was certainly, to my knowledge, that wasn't anything that's been said. What Guardiola did say that he was ready for the Premier League, but of course, does he want to risk throwing a player in there straight from the cold who hasn't had any competitive minutes with his team? If his hand was forced and all of a sudden, you had 2 or 3 injuries in that back line and he was needed, then you would happily put him in there. But I think with other options, I think it's maybe too risky, and I don't see him starting at Turf Moor. I could be wrong.
Also, Martin's pointed out again, Euro Super Cup midweek, so there's probably going to be eyeballs on that. I don't know how seriously Pep will want to take it, but probably because, it's the first time he's been there for a long, long while. He'll want to be the super duper champion of Europe. Manchester United up next, and I think we should have made a video on this as well, but, loads of people are really excited about Højlund, but he's got a type of injury which is, it's a back injury which can be exacerbated by overplaying. Is that correct, Ben?
Yeah, in short, I mean, look, we've seen it with the likes of Bajcetic from Liverpool. We've seen it with Marcus Rashford at Manchester United a few years back. You need to be managing the load of these young players, and particularly, the impact of playing week in and week out in the Premier League. That high energy, that high octane type of football at the types of intensity levels. The stresses and the strains on these young bodies can come home to roost. So it's better to be precautionary and preventative and be proactive in terms of managing players to try and sort of mitigate the risk further down the line, and that's really what we're talking about here with Holland. There is an issue there. They were aware of it as part of that medical. We've discussed this before. You do not pass or fail a medical. Ultimately, it's a list of recommendations that are made based on the information to hand, following a battery of tests and assessments, and then a decision based on whether there are going to be any long-term implications. It certainly isn't that. It's short-term, but minutes will need to be managed carefully. Initial expectation, maybe towards the end of August, all being well for Højlund. So that's where we are with regards to his availability.
Now, with the rest of the team, a lot of people have sent in questions. Garnacho starting over Sancho.
Just not a Sancho fan. I think he flatters to deceive. I think he's nothing like the player that we've seen on video reels from his time out in the Bundesliga. And I think Garnacho deserves his opportunity to have that start within the team. So that's why I have went with Garnacho over Sancho. The other maybe talking point would be at right back. It's a 50-50 call, meaning has Dalot done enough to maybe oust Wan-Bissaka from the team? No, time will tell.
And kind of continuing with the questions through the team, let's have a look. Yes. So we got a question about how to pronounce the Manchester.
You cannot pronounce.
Yeah. I can't pronounce. Siddharth, I hope I pronounced that one correct. He said, I thought it was Guardiol. He said it's Covardiol. Do you want to say that, Ben?
Covardiol.
There you go.
It's like it's just like Corvonier. It's just like that medicine, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. I'll have Corvonier in your head now.
Yeah.
Every single time I mention his name.
So I think that's it. If there are more Manchester United questions, please do send them in. I've been a little bit kind of down on Fernandes as an FPL asset as well. You've written about it in the 888 articles. People can check that out. But yeah, I've been praised for my pronunciation of Siddharth's name. And John.
Hold on, can I just say? And by the way, is Siddharth's name? It's not just SIDDAR, is it?
No.
Right, that's
it's
all right.
SIDDHARTH.
I mean, how? You're hardly reading like hieroglyphics here. Siddharth. Harry Smith, Jones, McKenna.
Yeah.
Well done, Ben. You've got McKenna right. And I get fucking Corvossier, what do they call him?
We're going to move on to the team news before more names are butchered. Newcastle are up next. What is the latest with them?
Admittedly, I did struggle with this Newcastle lineup. This is actually the third lineup that I've put down. This latest version is without Callum Wilson, as much as it pains me to do so. But again, I'm not 100%. There are issues here. I did start Harvey Barnes. I think in maybe his 2 goals against, I think it was Villarreal last weekend, maybe enough to cement his place within the team. If not, Eddie Howe can even look at the likes of Anthony Gordon to possibly come in. Or, like I say, Wilson with Isak moving out wide and Callum Wilson leading that front line. I just don't know. That's something to be aware of. And again, going forward, I think Callum Wilson's minutes will be managed more and more now that we've got that little bit of depth. Elsewhere within the team, You could argue that Dan Burn was a period of time when he was one of our best players in that left back role, deputising for the injured Matty Targett. Now that Matty Targett's had a full pre-season under his belt, he's going to be vying for a start. But I've went with Burn again. Fabian Shaw has been past fit, returned and rejoined the group on Tuesday, so he's had a full week without any kind of reaction. The other sort of main talking point may be around new signing Sandro Tonali. Look, undoubtedly he will be a great player for us over the coming weeks and months, but you may look to the likes of a Sean Longstaff, who has been or was brilliant for us, and that's not something that I thought I'd ever say, but he's been brilliant last season, and we really missed him when he wasn't involved. The only thing that puts us off Longstaff at the moment, he had that injury that carried over from last season, meant he missed out, picked up another little knock, and just returned to the squad last weekend. So again, just in terms of fitness, that's why I've went with Tonali.
And what about your best bud, Callum Wilson?
Yeah, like I say, it's a difficult one. I know Callum will want to have a big season. Is he the future for Newcastle? Long term, he's 31. He's going to be coming up to 32 this year. I just think Eddie Howe may pick and choose his matches a little bit more than he has done in the past. Look, he brings something different in Newcastle, something that nobody else has got in terms of his finishing ability. He is an outright goal scorer. But Callum Wilson has the ability to change matches from the bench. We've seen, I think it was in the last, no player, and I may be a couple of numbers out here, but no players had a better goals return from game week 29 to the end of the season than Callum Wilson. Of those 12 matches, he only actually started 6, and 6 came from the bench. So that shows his impact and what a contribution he can make, regardless of how many minutes he has.
He might be one of those players that I've written about in my article of like the super subs who might come on. They've now got, instead of like 10 minutes, they've now got 30, 40 minutes, if games are going up to 100 minutes plus. That could be a good shout, maybe, because he is so damn good, and against tired defences could be a great shout. Samir wants to know, and people do get involved with the comments below as well, if you've got some outrageous captain picks, do tell us and put the reasons why. I've captained Mo Salah. I'm just thinking with the kind of 100 minutes rule, Haaland coming off a little bit early, but as you said, Ben, in 60 minutes, he could score a hat-trick, he could score 4, and then I'm sunk already at the start of the season. But I'm going a little bit differential just because I want to play the game my way. But what about you, Ben? Who's your captain in the Dinnery 11?
It's probably a good reason. I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't actually have one for starters. So I've just brought my team up there to pick my team. And I am limited in choice, particularly in the attacking areas. I'm poor. Automatically, it's defaulted to Isak.
Right.
But realistic options for this game week 1, I think Eze or Richarlison. The fact that Newcastle are playing at home against Villa, that might be enough just to sort of tip the scales in his favour, with Eze getting the vice captaincy armband.
Yeah. Just to explain to people, you will have to go to Ben's Twitter to kind of see his very special 11. And so he doesn't have the kind of picks that most people have. In terms of it, Marius has said, you're going to have to prepare your sofa for tonight, Jason. Yeah, I'm really scared. I might change it at the last minute. I've got massive FOMO of Haaland, but at the moment, I don't know. It's one of those gut ones. I want to have a bit of fun at the start of the season. Everybody's talking about templates, this and that. I just want to play it my way, and we'll kind of see. I'll probably regret it as soon as Haaland scores a brace tonight. Jondre says, I'm not brave enough to back against Haaland. Yeah, most aren't. So, yeah, we'll kind of see. But, yeah, maybe Salah in game week 2. My kind of thoughts and feelings are almost like Salah when he's at home, Haaland when he's at home. But they're obviously both away this game week. And so I'm kind of going with the problems that I see at Chelsea. I feel like Burnley are going to be one of those classic stop outs. They don't want to lose on their first game of their return to the Premier League and might make it difficult, whereas there's a lot of problems. But Mark has also said Haaland hasn't looked great in pre-season and Burnley will make it difficult for City, which is what I'm just kind of saying. I don't read into pre-season too much, but there is obviously that fact as well. Nottingham Forest are up next, though. Ben, what is the latest on their injury news? Again, maybe a team that not a lot of people have got interest in, but is that Turner transfer done soon enough so that he can play at the weekend?
I do have my Turner starting, but again, whether Steve Cooper feels he's ready and he's been integrated enough with the team remains to be seen. Otherwise, it would be Shelvey starting, not the former Newcastle midfielder John Joe. I think it's George Shelvey for Forest. Unfortunately, and another one of my players, the game probably comes too soon for Taiwo Awumni, picked up an ankle injury away at Leeds during pre-season, won't be too far away. And another one of my players, disaster, and Niakite. Nothing against the player, but as an FPL asset, isn't great. Dislocated his elbow at the beginning of the summer. Those two players should be there or thereabouts in terms of training, but for game week 1, likely to come too soon.
Interesting. Martin Keenan has said Burnley also have Norwegian players, so they're immune to Haaland's liver farts. Great bit of news there. Another team probably with not too much attention on them, Sheffield United, but what is the latest there?
Not great. Paul Heckingbottom said that his squad is massively stretched. A lot of injuries to contend with. Most of those are long-term. FPL managers from a few seasons back will maybe cast their minds to a Ryan Brewster arriving at the club and thinking that he was going to be a great buy when he arrived from Liverpool. That never really transpired into being, a really good fantasy asset. Fortunately, he's been out now since, I think, last October with a hamstring problem, off and on anyway. Manager was given very little away in terms of their fitness. A lot could come down to whether these players are going to be ready for the squad. Ollie Norwood and Ollie McBurney are the two maybe household names of the team. And one of their big signings, Vinicius Souza, they're waiting for clearance, international clearance, with regards to obtaining that visa. However, Paul Heckingbottom said even if that does come through, he's had very little football, certainly no involvement in 11-a-side matches, and therefore in terms of his condition and his fitness, it's something that they're going to have to do the hard way and get those minutes competitively. But like I say, he's not in a position to be starting those games once he has that clearance.
We've been asked, do we have a Premier Injuries mini league? We do not. I don't know why. It's probably a bit of effort and
yeah, to have an FPL mini league would mean that I would have to actually do things in advance and prepared. And given the fact that I only picked a team for FPL at 12 o'clock,
yeah.
And then I actually did, once I picked that team, I thought, I should have organised a mini league.
Yeah.
And then it quickly went out my head, and then I moved on to do press conferences.
Yeah, we probably won't do one this year. We've got our eyes on content rather than mini leagues, but maybe in the future we might do one. We haven't done like a prize thing in ages, so let's continue to Tottenham. And I just want to ask, where's Harry Kane in that starting lineup, Ben?
Oh, Hazard, he's gone, isn't he? It was off. It was on. It wasn't happening. He wanted to stay in London, and then all of a sudden we wake up this morning. He's going. but he's not due to arrive in Germany until this evening. So he's apparently at a family home near Stansted. He's waiting for the green light or confirmation from Bayern that the financials that have been agreed in principle are locked down. And but as far as Tottenham are concerned, and it was fairly, I enjoyed the interview with the new Tottenham manager. And he spoke about Harry Kane, and he was asked about, did you ever feel that, you were going to have a conversation with Harry to try and convince him to stay? And he went, look, make no bones about it. When a club comes in and offers that type of money, even to get that stage, there's been some kind of discussion on whether the player wants to go. And Harry Kane made it fairly clear that any conversations with the managers would have just fell on deaf ears. It's something that he does want. While the deal has not been done as yet, it's a mere formality.
I'm just going to soak that in for a second. Let's continue with the analysis here. This is a great question. Ben, what is the Spurs' names? What is the Spurs' manager's name?
Sorry, Jason. Sorry, what's up?
The Spurs manager's name. Could you pronounce that for everybody?
Yep. Absolutely.
Would you like to say it on the stream?
All right. Yeah. Ante Posteglio.
Wonderful. Somebody said just call him Big Ange. That's what the Tottenham players.
Tottenham fans. Aussie at the helm.
Yeah. There you go. You've done an amazing job. Marius was kindly reminding us that he's called Big Ange. On to FPL discussions. We're having a bit of a mess about there, but Martin Keenan has actually brought up a really good point here that I also address a little bit in my article as well over on Scout. But it's the new rule around dissent, yellow cards. So there's no more going to be goalkeepers kind of putting players off because they can get booked for that. You can't be disrespectful. You can't touch the goalpost, the net, or delay taking of penalties. With dissent, if one player goes over to the referee, but they travel quite a far distance across the pitch to kind of run across and shout at them, they can get booked. If more than one player surrounds a referee, then each extra one can get booked. I think it's a fantastic rule change, but those who have a reputation, like Martin has kind of pointed out, Richarlison, who has in the past had not the coolest temperament, shall we say, he could get extra bookings. Now, obviously, I'd say don't worry too much until they're near the point of being banned, but it is something to keep in mind that we might be seeing more yellow cards this season, at least at the start, till players get used to it. So kind of continuing it, let's move on to, we're getting close to the end here, Ben. Big first one back, West Ham. The Hammers, they've been quite quiet thus far in the transfer market, but they have made some movements in the last few days, but none of those signings are early enough to get into the team, are they?
I'm just looking at the David Moyes press conference because that's happened during the course of, or just prior to we come on air, and there's nothing sort of major taken from that. We did hear from Eric Ten Hag. He was questioned around the availability of Harry Maguire, of which he responded, of course, he's available unless things change. Now, David Moyes has said that bid has been accepted. So it'll be a case of maybe Harry Maguire going down and potentially agreeing personal terms and crossing those T's and dotting the I's. But with regards to being available this weekend, that certainly isn't going to be the case. Also, David Moyes was questioned about the interest of Manchester City for Paquetá. As it currently stands, again, there's been no sort of movement with regards to that. Within the team, as it currently stands, we have Danny Ings. Again, that relates to not a fitness issue per se, or certainly not an injury issue, but Mikel Antonio did have a late return to the club following his involvement in the internationals in the summer with Jamaica. Is it Jamaica? I hope I've got that right as well. But yeah, so Danny Ings is probably just a little bit short, but that was his first start last weekend.
So we're moving through just people. If you've got any last questions, we shall continue. Robertson and Bruno Fernandes, more yellow cards. It could be. Samir has asked Ings or Vissa. It's a hard one. I mean, would you care to comment on that, Ben?
The concern for me with Ings is going to be minutes shared with Mikel Antonio. I don't think David Moyes will ever go with a 4-4-2. So I think it's one or the other. Therefore, Wissa for me, just because of the game time.
And finally, Wolves. I don't know what the hell the club are doing there. Sacking their manager. How many days was it? 3 days before the start of a season. Absolute shambles there. They've also sold quite a few players or lost them. They've not really strengthened the squad. They must be one of the favourites to go down now, mustn't they, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, Julian Lopetegui, I think the final straw was, I think when he came in, he was told that there's going to be very little available in terms of a transfer budget. So the focus of your targets should be young and coming players with lots of potential. Now, he said at the beginning of the summer that almost changed to actually you can't even have those players. It's now who can you pick up as a free agent. So there were, murmurings of discontent going on for a while. Now, Gary O'Neill said he was actually approached around about 10 days ago with regards to, his interest potentially in going to Molineux. He said he would jump at the opportunity. So, yeah, the deal, it was finally announced or the decision was taken on Wednesday. But I think behind the scenes, Gary O'Neill's been preparing himself for well over a week now. And they're always going to put a bit of a united front on to the media. And you're never going to get the full story. But, he's saying the right things and he's talking about, all of that noise who's coming from outside. They don't really fully understand what's going on in the club. And there's a good morale with the players. But look, you're right. How can the squad who didn't really compete last year, they were the lowest goal scorers in the Premier League. They struggled massively at times, but you've lost the likes of Adama Traore, Raul Jimenez, Ruben Neves, João Moutinho. All of those players have gone and nobody of any sort of real worthy notes come back. They will hope that maybe Kolasinac, if I got that right, I probably haven't. He suffered an ACL injury just 45 minutes into his debut last season. He's had a half-decent pre-season, but again, it's a big gamble on a player who hasn't played regularly in the Premier League.
So we're getting into the final questions here. I'm going to put that in the chat as well because we're about to wind up. But just before we get to the final questions as well, please do leave a like, do share the video, and do engage with us, through the season as well. Hit that subscribe button because we're going to be doing these every week so that you're up to date with the latest injury news. And every like, every share really, really helps us to grow the channel so that we can make better and better content. If people have seen some of our pre-season content, we've really upped the quality in terms of editing, overlays, things like that. I've been working behind the scenes to get that to a really high quality, and we'll be working on getting some really high quality guests on as well as usual. We've got some good connections, and we want to bring that sort of content to everybody as well. One question for you, Ben. John Dre has said, where is Doherty?
He's in and around the squad, isn't he? Not a lot of minutes, not a lot of involvement. And of course, Gary O'Neill comes in and that throws all of those pre-season preparations out the window. He's going to have his own philosophies and his own ideas about how he sees that, that team being set up. He's got a few additional days of managed to work with the players. Of course, they don't play until Monday at Old Trafford against Manchester United. So Doherty, yes, in and around the squad. Whether he gets that start, I guess it's going to be 1 or 2 weeks before Gary O'Neill has that settled starting 11.
We got a question: Mitoma or Garnacho? Who would you rather play, Ben?
Mitoma.
Let's have a look at these final questions. Evil's agreed with you. Sheffield United. Oh yeah, here's a question for you, Ben. Are Sheffield United trying to take Derby's lowest points record this season?
Look, I think they've been very unfortunate losing 2 players so late in the summer, with an Ndiaye and Sander Berge. That's certainly something that isn't great. And of course, those long-term injuries when you may have a limited budget, and of course, you maybe haven't got the attraction or the pull of some of those bigger clubs to get that quality in through the door. I think Sheffield United and certainly Luton as well are another team that, if they're in and around that relegation scrap after 35, 36 games and they've still got a chance, then I think, that's going to be a massive achievement, because it's going to be tough.
We've got, what's Solanke's issue, Ben?
It was more of a precautionary measure. He picked up a minor knock. He sat on the bench last time out, unused substitute. Areola wouldn't confirm either way, but certainly of all of those players who are close to return, then Solanke would be the one, barring any kind of reaction or setback on the training pitches.
We've got a question on Maddison and Luis Diaz, or Richarlison and Jota. Who would you pick, Ben?
Maddison and Diaz.
Excellent. And then I think the final question goes to Giandre. He usually asks us the final question anyway. Jackson or Visa, with uncertainty over where Chelsea is and Nkunku out, do you still think that Jackson is a good pick?
I'll go with all action Jackson, just because I think Chelsea will. I think they'll do all right this season.
There you go.
And
yeah,
we'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that. Anyway, thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. We're back every Friday. Make sure to like the video. Do subscribe to the channel, because we are here every week for you. We've got loads of content that comes out through the week as well. We'll be doing data dives. We'll be doing the latest injury analysis, and we'll be having great guests on as well. But for now, we're going to wish you the best of luck. Good luck